That's terrible. All right, we're off.
I did an interview with my good friend Benny Sledge, the black guy from Atlanta.
Absolutely.
I didn't have his mic on.
Oh gosh, you gotta
Talking
go back.
an hour and 15 minutes, and I didn't have his mic on.
Well, you got a
So we
lot
gotta
to get
do
in
it,
40 minutes. By the way, we can go for 2 hours.
All right,
so.
we're good. No. All right, and then so we'll talk about the early days. We'll talk about 9/11. You know,
I can talk about it all
I mean,
day.
I know. You know, and I think people want to hear that as well.
Of course.
And then what you're doing now, Charleston, Daniel Island, and of course the LeVeen's.
Yeah.
Then we're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the what's cool about, or not,
Save it. Beautiful. We're starting around.
I shouldn't say what's cool. I should say when 9/11 happened, we were in like our working lives,
Yeah, you were in it.
and then you come to secession for your release from that working life, and you spent so many time with people that were older gentlemen that kind of helped mold you as adults. You know,
Right.
you spent so much. You know, you started secession as a young kid. You know, you're just like, oh, this is so.
Well, that's
great.
what makes it so cool.
Yeah.
You had that going for you. Hey, we'll wing it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. We'll pause for just a little bit and give them time to edit. Get your hairs pretty.
How my eyebrows?
How's my ears?
That's my biggest concern.
How's my ears?
Here's perfect. 1, 2, 3. Hello, everyone. It's the Old Pro, Michael Harmon of the Old Pros table, and we got a chat session today with two of my favorite young people. Of course, they're in their 40s now, so they're old farts anyway. Mr. Jeff LeVeen and Andy LeVeen, the sons of Mr. Jeffrey LeVeen, who was a dear friend of mine, one of the earliest members of secession out of New York City, and perished in 9/11. And what's transpired since that time is something extraordinary and very befitting the person that I knew, the elder LeVeen. And I think he would love seeing these boys here today. We're just going to have a chat. Well, I've known these guys since they were basically 14, 15, and 16 and 17 for you, Jeffrey. And at the club, we've had a tremendous amount of time together, a lot of fun, a lot of soul-searching discussions as well. You know, we've been through a lot together, and I know how much the club meant to you, and our time together meant a great deal to me, and it was an honor, as I know you have a lot of friends that stepped in as dads during those difficult times. But we are. I was not going to do my chat sessions in the Low Country before tucking away in the mountains before getting these guys on video. We are at the beautiful Daniel Island Club in Charleston, South Carolina, where now Jeffrey and Andrew live. Spectacular place, spectacular, just a wonderful golf facility, 36 beautiful holes, but also just an extraordinary neighborhood as well. So we made the trip up today. We played a little golf today, not particularly well, but we had some fun. And now we're going to sit down and chat just a little bit. Guys, cheers.
Cheers.
Marvelous having you.
Thank you.
Delightful, Jeffrey.
Appreciate it.
We're drinking a beautiful Contessa
2016 Cabernet.
2016 Cabernet from Jeffrey. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Boys, let's just throw it out. Jeff, start first. Talk about briefly, just give them a quick background of school. I know that you barely limped into college somewhere.
Correct.
Andrew, pretty much the same thing. Give them a quick update. Andrew, you do the same.
So I am Jeff LeVeen Jr. I am the oldest of 5 children. Obviously, Andy is my brother, my younger brother. I went to Lehigh University, graduated in 1997.
In English.
Yes, I was
English. I don't think your dad would even like
I was
that.
an
I'm
English
sorry.
major. Well, I think he knew that there was going to be a hard time for me to graduate as a business major. I've spent a lot more time in fraternities and sororities
English.
and bars, and was not definitely studying. But I was the first of the LeVeen kids to go to college. I graduated Lehigh in '97, and from college years, that's basically the wrap, Eddie.
Great point. Summa cum laude.
Yeah, no.
No.
Summa cum C plus. C plus student.
C
But
plus.
did graduate in 4 years.
Andrew?
I don't know that Andy can say
I
that.
don't think you did.
I tucked in a
you
few,
graduate?
2 summer schools in there to make it out in 4 years. So I guess
Plus.
technically,
It was
Technically
definitely
fine.
4 plus. We went to
Technically
your
fine.
graduation. You didn't get a degree.
one of those summer.
We were there. You had to do summer classes after.
Great story about that degree. I got a blank piece of paper, and then I had to go to Southampton College to take oceanography, and I did that in May term out there. Mom and Dad weren't living at our house in West Hampton. I went to May term out in Southampton, got the credits, faxed it over, got the diploma. But I graduated high school in 1996. I chased a C- lacrosse career out at the illustrious Ohio Wesleyan University,
Yeah, baby.
battling Bishops. I went there in 1996, graduated there in 2000.
I majored in oceanography?
International business.
Okay, well, there we go.
I
All right. Now,
habloed
so you-
Espanol for
To be
about
fair,
7
to
seconds.
really close the story, just in case anybody's fact checking, I did go to school freshman year as a business student. I technically was invited back sophomore year because I didn't have enough credits to be considered a second semester freshman. So when I went back to school my sophomore year, I decided it was probably the best decision to become an English major. English is not actually always my best language, but here I am today, and things are okay. So I appreciate it.
English major,
But-
art major, art minor, and
But
probably art
our mother
2.
taught
Mine.
English at Syosset High School, so she always dreamed probably about having an English major.
English
And
major.
here we are sitting
There
here
we are,
laughing
yeah.
about it. My mom was
that's
so
good.
proud of him.
Well,
Listen,
there
she
you
still
Oh,
corrects
he's
most of my
going-
emails.
He's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
into English.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
He's
Yeah.
following my direction. I don't.
I had a minor in English.
Did you? I can tell you're well written.
You are.
I'll tell you what.
I had a minor in English. I had a major in history and international relations. Double major.
They say it's actually one of the best majors. You can do. I mean,
English.
Who said
you could
it?
do them. I don't know who they
Is that
are.
your mother?
My mom said that they were the.
My
it was
mom
the
was
best.
so
Mom said
proud.
that was a-
She
I'm
was,
so proud
that
of
was
her.
her only English major
I'm
job.
sure Dad would have loved English major. That's good. Yeah, that's really good. Talk briefly about we're squeezing in a dinner tonight with a bunch of reprobates, so this will be a little quicker. I'm going to do some stuff at the dinner tonight as well. I'm going to mic up people and have some chats, but and so it'll be kind of a hyphenated chat session where we'll have the dinner in on this as well. But so we're rushed. Normally we're not rushed. The earliest remembrances at secession. Andrew, you were
Earliest
14, 15.
remembrance of secession, it was, I want to say 1993, maybe 1994, depending on whether that was fall or spring. I went down there with good pal Patrick Ross. His
Pre-clubhouse.
Pre-clubhouse, was down there with Pat and Donnie Ross. Pat was a best friend growing up, still a dear friend to this day. Clubhouse was not there. We were getting some sandwiches from, I want to say, what is now the Caddy Barn, I want to say.
Okay.
And I remember I want to say Whitey was our first caddy.
Nice.
Whitey, who's still there as of last year.
Still there?
Still there, yeah.
Still there.
So
Doing
that was
singlebacks
my-
now.
that was my first remembrance of going into this place. And we didn't really know where we were going because I had never been to South Carolina before. Here we are, like, on this one-lane road going from Savannah Airport in, and I'm like, I don't even know what we're doing, but all of a sudden you got into the gates, and you're like, oh, this all makes sense now.
Yeah.
And off we went.
14. You stayed downtown?
Stayed
Must have.
downtown. We definitely stayed downtown at the Best Western. I remember going in there and thinking there was like this, the slide refrigerator, and all of a sudden we got in there late on a Friday night, and Donnie and my dad were there, and we started playing cards, and they were like signing their drinks on a chit, and I was just like, "Where's everybody?" It just didn't make sense to me that you were at like a club, and I'm like, I feel like I'm at somebody's kind of like house, but like I don't know.
Right.
Didn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's
but,
when you could go into the kitchen and make a sandwich.
yeah,
And just pull beers and throughout the night.
yeah, and,
as long
and
as you want.
nobody was looking for a free pass. It was
Hilarious.
organized chaos.
Hilarious.
I guess is how you would.
Deborah, how about you?
So I think for me,
Stay downtown. You must have been downtown.
I stayed downtown for the first, I think, trip, maybe 2 trips. But we didn't go on a lot of golf trips with my dad prior to secession.
He never
prior-
really
We never,
pushed us.
yeah, we
I
never
wouldn't say
went
he
to.
ever
That's pretty cool, though.
We
never
never went
pushed
to,
us.
but I think that what's hard to remember is, like, for a couple kids that grew up in New York on Long Island, secession in South Carolina was as exotic as an Ireland trip.
Right.
Like, it was an entirely different life down there. When you landed, I remember specifically walking out of the Savannah airport, and like the smell in the air was different.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was, I mean, granted, what I was probably smelling was probably a paper
Paper
factory.
mill, yeah, could have been.
And
But it could have been the
sulfur.
marsh.
But it could have been the marsh. But
The
again,
low
it's
country marsh.
same concept. Like, I remember driving, kind of was dark. We were in a rental car, and the kind of that main bridge. I forgot they've redone it now. It's now multiple lanes. But I remember that there was like they were doing work on that bridge, and like we were backed up. But then we finally pulled into Beaufort, and you know, my father took us around, or took me. I think we were both on one of the first trips that I'd done, and he took us, and we had a quick dinner at whatever the name of the restaurant was right in town, and then we walked behind where Luther's was and hung out back there for a while, and then the next day I remember, which I think most people do, that first time you get to Secession and you pull that left into the parking lot. This is pre-gate. This is back when everybody was okay to come on property without having to be checked. And we pulled right in, and I remember that slow drive up the driveway to the parking lot. Caddies were kind of coming and going, and they were still out there cutting the grass. And I remember just pulling up and seeing this clubhouse, and it felt like I was in a different country.
Yeah, and dirt roads. Remember the dirt?
Oh yeah,
It was muddy. Portable toilets.
for sure.
You know.
I mean, the early years, the first trips when it was still at the caddy shack, when the caddy hut was the clubhouse, and we were getting sandwiches from town, and you know, the one thing that stayed constant that I remember that still like resonates with me is that relationship with your caddy, and like the experience of this guy, and I've had them all. I remember Barry Rolex and all these guys, and some of the original guys who like, you know, you walked 18 holes with, and that was back when I was even worse than I am today, when I was a 18, 19 handicap, and I tortured this poor caddy for 18 holes. But I think that like it was to a point, by like the 12th or 13th hole, he would just kind of point me in a direction and hand me a club and be like, it's 130 yards over there. And but the thing about Barry, just for point of reference, was Barry had fake Rolexes, and that's how he got his name, Barry Rolex. He would come back to Secession after he did something up in
Florida.
Westchester.
He did
Well,
New York and Florida.
He did a Florida, but he'd come back from New York, and I don't know if he bought them in the Bronx, but he came back with a whole line of basically knockoff Rolexes, and so everybody in the caddy yard called him Barry Rolex. And the thing about Barry Rolex that you had to learn very quickly was one of his hands was paralyzed, and so he would take the ball from you with his left hand, and he would just shove it between his fingers. So, and then he would kind of rub it with the towel with his other hand, and then hand it back to you. So, like every time I'd walk up to give him a handshake, he'd always kind of deflect it with the left hand. But I mean, we could do 2 hours just talking about caddies, and to be honest with you, I very quickly, and I think what a lot of members do, or at least a lot of, I think, regular caddies that are constantly down at the club, is you get into a rhythm where you have the same caddy. Yeah. And so for a period of time, I had every caddy under the sun. That transitioned to a caddy named Dan Daniels, which my dad got a kick out of because he had his name's Dan Daniels. I mean, if you can't get a kick out of that, then you shouldn't be watching this podcast. So I had Dan Daniels.
I like that.
And Dan was an amazing guy who obviously had some demons, and he went on with life. And then I transitioned to a guy who I will just, in case he's on Facebook or people can track him down, I refer to him as Beefy. Pro knows him. He actually caddied for Pro when Pro was at Harbor Town a few years ago.
Yeah, qualified.
Yeah,
at 50.
Yeah, what was that?
Just a section qualifying spot, and Beefy caddied for me. And Beefy was always my guy.
I want to say it was like the MCI Heritage.
The Heritage MCI.
I'm trying to, what year was that though? It was like the last 10 years.
I wouldn't.
2005, 6, something like that.
I mean, and
years.
Beefy, like, Andy likes Beefy, but the thing about Beefy is that he has got patience for about 2 holes into it. So by the 3rd hole, you could already hear him in your backswing as you're making contact, either promoting what you just did or really disappointed. But I love the guy because
He saved your dog.
he actually, here is the story about
story.
Beefy. Like, these guys become family, and I recently, I got married, I started to have kids, we bought a summer house, and when I left Secession, I said to Beefy, I'm like, look, I've got a finished room above my garage, you should come up and spend the summer with us. And he was like, well, I got nothing else to do. This is before he was married, and so he headed up for the summertime, and he caddied, I should say he caddied at West Hampton. I think he technically looped about 4 or 5 times over 3 months, but he lived in my garage, and my wife just could not understand exactly who this person was. But like, the truth of the matter is, we've always had French bulldogs, and my oldest French bulldog at the time was a dog named Marley, and Marley was sick. He was epileptic. We gave him plenty of medication, and he walked outside and stumbled into the pool, and he was basically in the midst of drowning. And Beefy walked out of the garage and saw the dog drowning, and actually went over and pulled him out of the water. And so Beefy's claim to fame at my house, if you were to talk to my wife, is that he saved our dog. So
Bingo.
I mean, he did.
He did save your dog.
He did save your dog.
One of the great lines about Beef was at Harbortown. I told him, I said, Beef, we're not going to make the cut, okay? I mean, this is a Thursday, Friday affair, okay? There's thousands of people. I'm playing with Lucas Glover and DJ Trahan. It's a South Carolina pairing. I'm 50 years old, okay, bud? We're not going to make the cut. So I'm enjoying myself. I'm walking over here and high-fiving, and I'd crisscross over here and high-five and hug somebody. And I'll walk down further. We'd putt out, and I'd high-five and hug 3, 4 people going to the next team. And it was just a party, basically. Beefy, after about 4 or 5 holes, he said, damn it, pro. You look like the governor at the state fair. He said, focus. I said, Beef, we're not going to make the cut, okay? I'm a rock solid 4 handicapper on tour. I'll punch out a bunch of 76s and off we go. But the governor at the state fair. So I love that one.
That honestly could be you in actually all aspects of life, though. So he actually did term that.
He named that one. Yeah, he named that one.
That was good.
How about do you remember staying in the clubhouse with Miss Mary flipping blueberry pancakes and I mean that had to be you're in your room with your dad or he brought the 2 of you and he stayed in a room by himself or something, but tell me that had to be really fun.
You graduated from the Best Western in town.
Correct.
From like doing, the walk around, we were young and he would try to sneak us into the restaurants and, there was other fathers and sons there, and they try to, have a good time with us. And then you went back to the Best Western. Now you were in the clubhouse. It was like you graduated. It was like it's like your grounds.
Well, I also remember just going up there and like and to this day, I think when you bring guests, I could tell you, in the last 15 years, I would say I've slept in room 8 upstairs in the clubhouse 97% of the time. Room 8, the same bed to the left, and it's very simple. I mean, for those of you that haven't been there, there's 12 rooms upstairs. You have a few select rooms. I think there's 4 or 5, 6 rooms that face the back side of the clubhouse that have access to the porch. And I've always taken one of the suite sides. So you have room 1, which is on the far side that looks over the putting green and the terrace. Room 2 mirrors room 8, and it's a 2-bedroom suite that has an access point out to the patio. And between room 2 and 8, I think all the even rooms are, maybe it's 2 through 8 are all patio facing, or they're on the porch side that face the back side. But I remember specifically, at first being so uncomfortable with the concept of this is bare bones. You have a room. This was couple had TVs. None of them had TVs. Nope. I think it had the cheapest bed in town. It was you slept on it. I remember being this is the most uncomfortable night of sleep I've ever had. It had an alarm clock that didn't work ever. It was plugged in. You couldn't change the time. It just blinked 12. And then you'd walk out to the bathroom.
Blink 12.
Yeah, and you had this bathroom where I was this is the most bizarre thing. I'm in here. There's 2 stalls. I'm in here with some guy I don't know. I'm gonna strip down and take a shower. But I will tell you, the one thing that I remember the most was, do you remember like the green bars of soap they had there? Like, I don't know that those are, I don't know that, I think that company went out of business because I think,
No,
It was that Pine.
no, it was
but I will
Pine.
tell you,
Same soap they had at Pine Valley.
I used
was
to
fine.
I used to grab a couple
Still.
of those. If you went into the morning, if you were the first person in the morning, you can go in and I'd grab 2 or 3 of them and shove them in my duffel bag and bring them back to,
No doubt.
you know, wherever I was, New
No
York,
doubt.
Hoboken.
Bro, you don't remember
I remember
when
that.
there was a we came down I think it was just my dad and I, and we were leaving and we had just gone to see Buddy and Tully, and we, you know, see you next time, we're leaving, and Tully gave us a bag, a shoe bag,
A shoe bag of the green soap.
and
Yeah.
15 of the plastic cups.
The plastic cup. Oh,
And
yeah.
the cup, the bag, he gave us so much, the bottom of the bag split and all the cups dropped. And here we are talking to you like, hey, goodbye, we'll see you next time. And you're just like, and my dad was like, wanted some cups.
Beautiful.
You're like,
Cups
what are you,
and soap.
stealing the
Cups
stuff?
and soap.
And we had
Cups.
15 bars of that pine soap, 15 plastic cups that we were taking back to Long
How
Island.
about a cheers to Buddy
It
and
was
Tully?
amazing.
Yeah,
Oh,
Buddy
they were the
and
best.
Tully.
Yeah.
Buddy and Tully. I'm sure we'll
Unbelievable
see you.
people.
We'll see you. You'll see this at some point. We all love you. They were the best.
I
Or
can't
something
wait
more
to
than
see
that.
They
that.
they
that
definitely, those guys, you know,
Unbelievable.
I mean, and my dad, again, like it's a shame because, like, his recollection, his relationship with people, you know, he had a different relationship with Buddy, and he had a different relationship with Tully, and, like, again, there've been bartenders for years that have gone through that place, Donnie and everybody else that have gone through that place. But, like, again, I've known Buddy or Tully now for 25 years.
25, 30 years.
And so these guys, I mean, every time you see them, and like, it's funny, every time we get to the Christmas card period of the year, I'm like, gotta get one of the guys in the shop. And you go in there, and on their back wall, they've got all these different Christmas cards. I think it started with maybe 2 or 3 people, and then like they came, you know, people go get their shoe shine, and they say, you know, LeVeen's are sending them Christmas cards. And every year you go back, and that wall gets more full with Christmas cards.
Yeah.
Just because people poke their head in there. But like, again, those guys have always been great about the cleanup, and not just, I'm not talking the shoes, I mean just anything that's gone on at that place. They're like the disaster recovery site. You go back there, someone gets hurt, they've got a process. Someone makes a mess, they can clean it up. I mean, I'll tell you, what about the year Uncle Eddie had the situation?
Well, I was going to bring it up.
And then it's not, and we don't normally bring it up, but the year that there was another
The
member.
machete that falls out of the locker.
So there's a member there who hosts an event,
Yeah, fall through his foot.
and he has a plaque that is to denote the kind of champion of their event, and it's a gigantic hunting knife. And the hunting knife, I guess, fell off this plaque, and somebody found it and threw it into the locker that my Uncle Eddie, who's my mom's brother, who's come down to the memorial tournament with my dad for years, and he could do a full podcast with Uncle Eddie down here. And my uncle shows up to put his shoes on, and I can tell you the last thing my uncle ever wants to do is play golf. He comes down to take naps and to have meals and to spend time with us and to support us, hang out with Mike. But he is there for porch activity, not golf activity. And I can name a dozen people that do that. But he opens the door to the locker, and I guess the knife had fallen in and was leaning on the door, and it falls straight through the top of his foot. And immediately he's got a hunting knife that's probably the blade is this big through the top of his foot, and Tully jumps in there, runs a tourniquet around his ankle. They get him to the hospital, and honestly, I've never seen my uncle more happy to be driving around on a golf cart later that afternoon with 15 stitches in his foot because he didn't have to play golf anymore. So,
Yeah, that knife was this big.
oh,
It was
it's still there.
huge.
It's like, I don't know.
It's in one
I
of the
saw,
trophies.
and somebody said on the golf course. To be honest, I don't even know, but I feel like I was doing okay in the event, and I was in one of the last groups, and I see him come up in the golf cart, and somebody had mentioned like a hole before. They're like, "Hey, Uncle Eddie's in the hospital," and I'm thinking the worst. I'm like, you know, what could have happened?
Right.
And all of a sudden, he comes rolling up. He's on the golf cart. It's him and Catfish.
And about 10
And
transfusions.
he's laughing. They're like pounding each other. And I'm like, are you okay? He's like, I've never been better. And he was like, by the way, have you been to the Beaufort Memorial Hospital, whatever it's called? I said,
Beaufort Memorial.
to be honest, no, I have never been there. Thank God, knock on wood. I don't plan to be there anytime soon. He goes, Oh, you gotta go. The nurses there,
You gotta
nicest.
go.
They're the prettiest
You gotta
girls in town. They are so kind. And I'm like, are you okay? He goes, yeah, I cut my foot. And I'm like, all right, well, sorry you didn't win the event. He's like, I'm good.
Well,
I
I'll
have to
tell
tell
you.
you, I have to tell you one quick one on Buddy. I heard it the other day. I'd never heard this before. Buddy, somebody gave him a hard time, and Buddy said, "Hey, I've only got 2 words for you, and it ain't Merry Christmas."
That is Buddy. That is Buddy.
I gotta steal that one.
Well-
I gotta steal that one.
Well, I'll tell you. So Andy and I started out because we were younger. We were, teenagers. I was coming out of college. He was in high school, then in college, where we did trips down with my dad. And then I graduated college, and so this was '97, and I was working at Citigroup for Bobby Moore, who we can tell a story about later on if we have time.
talk for
That'll
an
be
hour.
another podcast.
That's another whole.
That's another
Another
podcast.
hour.
That's about the temper.
About
That's a podcast on temper.
That's a wonderful podcast.
Yeah, we'll
He's a
skip
near
over
and
it.
dear friend. He was one of my dad's best friends. But so I was working at Citigroup, and he graduated. He got a job at Citigroup. Ironically, again, thank you, Bobby.
Thank
for
you.
watching.
Thank you, Bobby.
Same guy?
Bobby, love you.
Yeah,
Same
he's the reason why we have careers on Wall Street. And then it got to a point where I had joined, and now we're getting into 2000, and my brother joined, and we were at Smith Barney at the time. I don't even know if it was technically Citigroup at the time. And we were both single, and we were both living I think he was in New York City, and I was in Hoboken. And we would go in, and at that time we left our clubs down there. We left clothes and shoes with Buddy
And a
and
bag
Tully.
of club.
And,
a bag of clothes.
And we basically would be at Citigroup
It was the first
on
club
a
we
Friday.
joined. We joined Secession before we joined anything
in
in New
another
York.
club.
Yeah.
In New York City.
In
And
New
that
York.
was not uncommon.
No,
That was
you
not.
would keep an eye on flights, and you would say, okay, we can get a flight on United right now from Newark down to Savannah for $190. We'd go we'd leave work on Friday.
with your
Nothing.
with your briefcase or something.
By the way,
Yeah.
literally
Or
nothing. We would go to the airport. We'd hop in a cab, go to the airport, hop the flight down, get into Beaufort. We'd roll in. We'd see Donnie. Donnie Hustle would be there. He'd come out. We'd order some pizzas into the clubhouse, and we'd sit there and we'd have some beers, and then we'd go out and we'd play 36 holes, and then we would do the same thing. We'd eat pizza. Donnie would come out with some paste because he'd have 3rd-degree burns on his legs.
Remember when I got?
Yeah,
Remember?
I remember that.
On your-
They
Oh,
were-
no,
on
we were
your
playing
leg.
36 holes. I had to run to the shade of the woods, like the palm tree. That last.
He
round.
had to a point where he was blistering. My mom would have been beside herself, and we
Now
would
she's
play.
gonna hear
We'd
this.
play
Yeah,
36
that's
holes.
okay now.
Yeah,
It was so
Like,
long ago, Mom.
You could edit
I'm
that.
like SPF 50 now.
We
It
would
was so
play.
bad.
We would play 36.
I
Talking to
even
your
remember the
mom.
room we were in. We were in room 1,
Yeah,
which was all the way at the end.
and we would play 36. We'd have pizza. We would drink 27 beers. We'd walk upstairs, go to bed at about 9:15, get up, play 18, and then run to the airport and fly back. And the whole trip, from start to finish, would cost us each probably $400,
Right.
of which 200 was
200
caddy
with the
fees.
flight and
Yeah.
the flight.
It was caddy fees, a flight,
Your
and
drinks.
then a few so we would basically
Did
we
you
did
eat?
this at least once or twice, and then obviously we started to transition into 2001. So
Well, and I can remember in those early days, you're talking about your first club. I would say out of New York City, during my time, I probably sold 40, 50 memberships to guys out of New York that was their first club.
Yeah.
Because they were 28, 20, 35, whatever, and they can't get in Wingfoot, they can't get in
Yeah.
Baltusrol, they can't get in anywhere in New York. But here was a nice place to have for not a lot of money. It didn't cost them a lot on the annual. And so they bought there, and whatever they ended up buying in New York, this augmented beautifully. So that was not uncommon at all.
And getting on a flight back then was a lot easier.
Sure.
You know, obviously post 9/11,
Right.
that changed, but before that it was easy. I remember I was a sophomore in college. I think I was a sophomore. Maybe I was a freshman in college. So it was 96 or 97. Dad calls, or emails at the time, I think. He calls, he's like, hey, do you want to play in the reunion? I want to say it was our second reunion we played. And it might have been, it wasn't the reunion that we played in together, but I think the year before that. And I was like, yeah, are you kidding me? Delaware, Ohio in February is a pretty great place. So he was like, okay, great, I'll send you your flight. You didn't have it on your phone. He had to mail the ticket to me. And he's like, Donnie's inviting Pat again. You know, it seemed to be a place that we used to always go to. And he's like, you'll fly down Friday and we'll fly back Sunday, because the reunion was perfect. It was a Saturday, Sunday event, and you didn't miss school. So he had to mail the ticket out to me. And I was like, okay, great. So he FedExed the tickets out to me. Friday night, college, we don't need to go into it. Saturday, I'm on the way to the airport. I get to the gate, I was like, whoop, got no ticket. They're like, well, you can't get on the flight. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't? They're like, you don't have a ticket. I was like, okay. Go back to my room, get the ticket, get back on like a 3 o'clock flight. Or maybe we were going out for a practice round.
Dude,
But
you missed the practice round.
yeah, missed the practice round. Got down Friday night, and sure enough, like those goes to show you like the difference of what an airport is like and what the flights were like. Where it was like,
Before we
Can't get
get
on.
before we get into 9/11, I would think both of you, and you've been down with your son, I know already. That has to be something you really look forward to in the years to come as they go to college. Sending them a ticket. We'll meet for 2 days or 3 days.
Cool.
I mean, and just hide for 2 or 3 days, spend breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, walking on the golf course with Whitey, with Beefy, all of it. It just continues into the next generation. That
his
has
son
to
is a
be.
perfect example of that.
Yeah, well,
because-
you came in. I remember this spring or fall of last year.
His birthday. He
Was
did.
his
So,
birthday.
by the way, this is his thing now. He he was like, I want to do a birthday party, and so again, I'll make it very quick because I know we have other topics to cover. But he turned, I think, 11, and he came to me and said, I'd like to do a secession trip. And like after I stopped crying, I was like, let's do this. And we invited 4 dads or 3 other dads and 3 sons, and we just did 2 dads and 2 sons. We stayed upstairs. It was a dad and a son in each club in each room. The 3 other guys I came with were like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. We went down to Ren's and had dinner. They brought out a cake for him. And by the way, the kids were torched. They can't. This was. I think we did it on the late side of the season. There was nobody there. We stayed upstairs, but 4 kids walking 18 holes. It was 95 degrees. Like
Yeah,
half
he's
of them
born
were
in
like,
August,
you know, at one point I just had a handful of his clubs. I will tell you, LJ and his buddy that I played with played each hole. They like got a kick out of the 17, playing teeing off on 17. But he gets it. But it's totally different. What's different about it is when we went down with my dad, we're hanging out with my dad on a golf trip. Sure. But now when I go down there, I'm like, this is where my dad is. Like the 2 chairs and everything else. Like the secession, my dad's spirit lives at Secession, and just because you could feel him there. That's what he loved. He loved Budweiser's, the back porch. He loved the golf course. He loved the camaraderie. He loved I will tell you, and Andy will tell you the same thing. The difference between my dad, and it's something that I remind myself often, is he treated the CEO of Canner, and our mailman the same exact way. You would never know the difference. Stanley, our mailman, and Peter DePuzzo from Canner Fitzgerald, he treated with the same exact regard.
Correct.
And like it was just
that's a great man.
And it's the same exact way at Secession. He treated the guys in the shop, the guys in the back room, or the out at the locker room, or the back locker room, out of the bag room, and then behind the bar, he treated everybody the same.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
again, I think for us, the fact that LJ had that desire to do Secession, to me, was just another sign that he's out there.
But think about that. That's going to continue for decades.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Well, his son's getting older.
Decades. You're getting the same.
I could see reunions ahead of us, you know, where we go down with both of our
Together.
sons and like
Together.
we hang out. Like, I mean, it'll be great. I think the big thing is that my dad never. He wasn't Earl Woods, right? He wasn't standing over us screaming about golf. He couldn't care less if we played it. But I think that the beauty of it is like I want to do everything, and I think Andy is the same way. Where it's like give a kid a golf club, let them get what we're doing and enjoy it, and then it's time spent together, quality time spent together.
Well, you grew up. Your dad grew up in a culture out on Long Island, where the quality of the clubs was just of such a high standard. And when we were starting Secession, he knew as everyone knew, I knew the original general partners, Tim Moss, Bob Walton, all the original founders. They all knew it was going to take 100 years to create what we were wanting to do.
Yeah.
Your kids will actually see that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's you see some of it now, but that for your dad to see and to buy into that is so cool, and what made him so special, and just like everybody else, he had a huge golf IQ, and now because of that, you're going to be enjoying decades of golf with your own sons. Talk briefly about 9/11. I know it's a difficult subject. We're almost 20 years into this. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. But where were you? How are you today? I don't even feel comfortable bringing it up. But
no, bring it up.
Talk about it, Jeffrey.
I can tee it up because I think that
this is Cantor Fitzgerald. Your dad was at Cantor.
So for starters, we've talked about Bobby Moore. He hired both Andy and I. We were working at now what was known as Citigroup. Citigroup was 390 Greenwich. Greenwich Avenue actually ran into the North Tower. So Greenwich Avenue, if you were to walk down 4 or 5 blocks, you are at the base of the World Trade Center. 2 weeks prior to 9/11, I'd actually gone up to the 104th floor where my dad worked. After hours, I had to grab a travel bag because I was heading out to Las Vegas for a bachelor party the weekend prior to 9/11. I had come back from that weekend, but again, on the actual day of 9/11, we were both at work. Andy was in operations at the time. I was on the trading desk. My assistant, who was actually my best friend growing, still one of my closest friends, was outside grabbing coffees at one of those carts outside of the office, and he was standing there when he saw the first plane hit the North Tower, and he saw the explosion. He came up. He, was 6'2", Irish kid named Matt Feeney, was like out of breath, like very flush in the face. I was sitting on the trading desk trying to kind of get our day started. It was
Tuesday.
8 something in the morning and Tuesday, and he's like, the plane hit the World Trade Center. I said, okay. I'm like, which World Trade Center? And he said, the North Tower. And he said, it was a big explosion, and we're all gathering information. This is all prior to it was on the news. This is before there was a helicopter over it.
Sure.
And so we're sitting there, and I tried to hit. There was these direct wires into Cantor Fitzgerald. I tried to hit one. It was dead. And then within about 5 or 10 minutes, there's now every media source was covering it, and you could see the North Tower and a hole and some smoke, and it looked bad, but like we were saying, is it a Cessna? It was but by the way, everybody,
was the original.
If you hear about 9/11 and people talk about 9/11, what they'll tell you, and Andy can remember being in New York, it was like today. It was crisp. It was 70. It was
There wasn't
clear.
a cloud in the sky.
There's no mistake. You didn't have a plane that said, there's some fog and I hit a building.
Right.
This was obviously not a mistake, but you didn't know it wasn't a mistake for another 25 minutes until the second plane hit the second tower. And so we're sitting there watching this on the news, and I pick up the phone and I call out to San Francisco, and I actually have a friend that works at Cantor Fitzgerald in San Francisco, a guy named John Lane, and I grab him and I get him on the phone. I'm like, hey, what's going on up there? And he's like, they're all right. He's like, your dad's on the Hoot. He's the Hoot system. Every Wall Street firm has speakers. We have one in our firm.
We still use it today.
Where I can communicate with one of my 26 regional offices, and I can hit a button and talk to everybody, and it's a speaker box. I guess it's routed or it's wired a little differently in the fact that these lines weren't down. And so the San Fran office was talking to New York, and they were trying to get people out of the building. And then they were trying to wait for the fire chief because that's what the message they were getting up there. So we're sitting there, and I hang up the phone, and we're sitting there, and they have the coverage, and I'm sitting right underneath a TV. And the way that the Citigroup trading floor at the time was probably 3 football fields. It was gigantic. It was one of the bigger trading floors on Wall Street. And as we're sitting there, you can see the second plane kind of come into view and then collide with the South Tower, and now both are engulfed. And as soon as that happens, our building gets evacuated, and they have sirens going off. the head of.
And you're where?
I'm at.
We're like 4 or 5
5
blocks
blocks north.
north.
5
of
blocks
it.
north. Okay.
And so
You're
that-
inside?
Yeah.
He
we
was
worked-
50 yards
we
away from
worked,
me. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was 50 yards away from me in Ops.
Wow.
We all we're on the 3rd floor. We get in
It was
stairs.
organized leaving the
We
building. It
hopped,
wasn't
yeah.
like
There was no
mass chaos.
panic.
We were just walking out. Like nobody knew. We didn't really know what was going on because like you saw it on some of the television screen, but you were just like, okay, well, now we got to go. I'm like,
Did you connect?
Oh yeah,
At
we
that
were.
well, we
point-
were so
at that
close to
point
each
you
other
were
anyway
close,
when
yeah.
we walked out.
We
like,
lived
it wasn't
we
that
were-
hard to find each other because
found
if you
each
look,
other, though.
well, it wasn't that hard.
There was
not that many
hundreds.
floors.
There was
was not
hundreds
that
of
many
people
floors.
that were standing outside.
And our trading floor and who we supported, or at the time, like there was only a couple hundred of us, so it
Correct.
wasn't that hard to find
Okay.
anybody.
Well, we at the time we were also roommates, so like we
Yeah.
lived in Hoboken. So that was well, that's another podcast. But
Right.
he had moved in, didn't pay rent for. Well, that's another story. But we
Yeah,
were.
but he looks good.
Yeah,
He,
he is.
he said,
So
"You're paying him rent, right?" And I'm
Look
like,
good.
"Yeah, no." And then he yelled at Jeff,
So we're standing outside
"If
of
you don't charge him, he's never gonna know."
we're standing outside of Citigroup, and it's now we're staring down 5 blocks at these 2 towers up in flames, and Bobby Moore comes over, and we're talking to us, and he's like, "Let's go figure out where they're evacuating people. We'll go find your dad." And we're having a conversation.
I bet he was cool.
He
Oh,
was
he was
still.
cool as a
You
cucumber.
could tell. You could tell.
I bet he was taking care of you.
Oh,
He
well,
was.
Yeah, he,
He
was.
was
He
taking care
totally
of
was. And
you.
you know
He
who
was.
was also there? Louis Schneider, who was another
Louis Snyder
was a secession guy for a
I
while.
mean, there was a ton of guys. Danny
Same guy.
McCoy was
Like,
there.
a lot
There
of
was a ton
guys.
of.
Louis Schneider had a big job there, and he was like, "Listen, we're gonna
They kind of
we'll
rallied
figure
around
this
you.
out."
There
yeah, and
was.
he was
Sure.
just like, "We'll
Yeah.
figure it out."
But
And then all
keep
of
in
a sudden,
mind, keep
dude,
in mind how many secession members were met there.
Sure,
Veg.
in New York.
oh,
Brian,
there's-
I
well,
think-
on this one trading desk that we had,
JT
there was probably
Cacciavata.
15 secession members.
Yeah.
All
Doug
guys that you sold
DiPietro,
memberships
there was-
with. Everybody.
I mean, you had 15 guys there, and so we're all standing out front, and it's obviously panicked because we now have planes hitting buildings,
Right.
like, and then you hear that there's other planes, and now at this point there's
F-15s.
whatever the F was, F-16s, F-15s,
Right.
flying up and down the Hudson, and you're like, this is an act of war. Something's going on here, and we're trying to make decisions on, all right, where do we head down to Battery Park? Are we going to head over towards the Brooklyn side? Where are they evacuating people to? Let's get down and find where they're going to get Dad to. And all of a sudden, there's a rumbling, and the South Tower collapses, and we're 5 blocks from there. And so it was, as we're standing on Greenwich Avenue, you can see people heading up the street. Now, my dad's in the North Tower, so at this point, we're like, this is obviously not good. We are now pushed uptown, and
Yeah, they
so
won't let you go south at this point.
so we are now routed out to the West Side Highway, and actually, you know who's with us the entire time? Chris Conifrey. So Condo was with us,
Condo.
and we were heading up the West Side Highway, and we probably got another 10 blocks up. And so, I mean, again, in time, it was probably, you guys can fact check, but probably another 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And you kind of hear that same sound again, and you turn around and you watch as like the North Tower collapses. And I'm like, listen, man, it's been a while since the plane hit the building. There's a chance he could have gotten down.
Yeah.
I don't know enough. I wasn't at
You
that
think
point.
the same?
I
think
mean,
the
I
same
think
way?
at the same time, you're kind of just like, I don't think you're ever going to sit there and be like,
It's
he's
over.
gone.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it
I
wasn't.
think at that time
wasn't.
you're thinking like,
It was too much.
we don't know.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? And also there's kind of like panic all around the streets where they're like, we got to get everybody out of Manhattan, where they start teeing up all these like dinner boats.
Yeah.
And anything that can get people off the island, because the subways were shut.
Right.
You're not sending people downstairs. You're not sending people up in buildings. So they were just like, now the police and everything is just like, we got to get everybody out of the city and make sure the streets are safe and all this other nonsense.
So we're on the.
So
And you're
all of a sudden-
being shoved further.
And you're
from
being,
you.
you just,
We're
and
being
when we're
forced
sitting
back.
there like,
You're
no,
getting
we got to
forced
get down
from
there,
your dad,
or
yeah.
dad works there, and then it's like, listen, it's not going to happen.
So
It's not gonna
for
happen.
any
We're not
like
going down there, it's a disaster.
any New Yorkers that are on this podcast, we were pushed up towards Chelsea Piers, and we kind of got dumb luck. We pulled up. There wasn't a wait. There wasn't.
No,
we
we got
got
on
pushed
some,
right
like,
onto
dinner
some boat,
It was an old dinner boat.
and then the boat goes straight across to Weehawken, which is the town north of Hoboken where we were living. We get off the boat, and I think we actually walked down.
We
And
walked.
we walked from Weehawken down to Hoboken, which
To
again,
home.
we got home, and people reconvened there. My best friend that I grew up with, I think he was actually with me. I think Matt stayed with
Matt
us.
was
the
with
entire-
us.
Condo was.
Condo came
Condo
by.
lived in
Condo
Hoboken.
was-
yeah.
Condo was around
Yeah.
the corner. My sister Betsy was in Hoboken, and
Yeah.
she came over. and we were all there, and we were all obviously shaken up, and so it was a mess, and like obviously there was a lot of fear, and like, and we tried to reach out to my mom, and this is like kind of the first contact we had with my mom since like, you know, we obviously left the city. Since we got out of the city, because again, keep in mind, my dad never had a cell phone. My dad never made it through the cell phone era. Like, I think he just got an email.
He said he spent all day on the phones. He goes, I don't ever want a phone.
But I will tell you, here's the ironic. Here's the ironic part.
It's old school.
Yeah,
I will tell you.
I love the phone from 9:30 to 4.
He just said that my dad was never a phone guy. When I was in college, I remember you'd call him, and I'd call him at work. And like now that I work in the same industry, I recognize the fact that like 9:30 to 11 is a tough time to talk, and then 3 to 4 is 3 to 4:30 is a tough time to talk. I'm sure I never paid any attention to this, but he never said, I can't talk, I'll call you back. It was always he made some time, and it was likely in the 2 to 5 minute range, but that was all I needed. Ironically, and I cited the bachelor party, I'd gotten home on Sunday night, I didn't talk to my dad, I went to work Monday, I got home after work and I was exhausted, and it was 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I picked up the phone and I called his apartment. He was living in the city. This is Monday, September 10th, and he answered, and I talked to him for probably an hour and 20 minutes that night on the phone.
Nice.
And like, I remember when I spoke with him, like, we talked about everything. We were talking about work, we were talking about, you know, kind of, you know, for him, like, you know, how much longer are you going to do this? You don't have to do this anymore. Yeah. He's like, I don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel yet. I actually enjoy this. My clients are great. My job is great. We're going to start spending some more time in the city.
They had an apartment in town
that
they
rented
just bought.
They
just
started.
They were renting it.
63rd and Lax.
I remember that. They were going to spend more time in town.
He was kind of working there. He would kind of get up. He'd do a workout. He'd go down to work. He'd come up. My mom would kind of come in, and so they were enjoying it. And like that was
entertaining.
That was the sweet spot.
Clients, and he's like, if I can not save the hour back every day to fall asleep to get on the 5:05 into the city, he's like, this is great. He's like, this buys me 5 or 10 more years, and I'm at the height of my career.
Right.
I mean,
just to add,
it was a joy.
And just to add to it, I will tell you,
you know, at that time he was like, covering these guys for 20 years. These were his buddies.
Right. He was at the peak of his earnings in terms of his career. He was making as much money as he ever did because it was easy. All of his buddies were senior people.
He was rolling too.
And on top of it, he was having the most fun. That summer leading into that August leading into 2001, I went and joined him for, I think, 2 or 3. He went on a 5-night concert run for Dave Matthews at, I don't know if it was the Meadowlands or MetLife, and then went up to Boston for 2 nights. So I think he saw Dave Matthews 7 nights in like 12 days. I went 2 nights, and he was like, you want to come back tonight? I'm like, I can't, I'm exhausted. He went every single night. He had his car. He would stop in Hoboken. He would grab sandwiches. He would set up a tailgate. He'd bring customers in, young, middle-aged.
Every kid went at some point, 1 or 2 shows.
Yeah,
everybody was in. Everybody was in. Everybody also knew, like, Dad had extra tickets.
Well, that summer, did he not lose the? Did he not win or lose the club championship
to Terry McBride? God rest his soul. He's no longer with us, but Terry McBride was probably one of the best golfers. I think he played number 2 to.
I don't know.
He played number 2 to a pro,
very accomplished
like one
player
of the he played number 2 to like a very big name, you know, PGA player.
And that was at West Hampton.
It was at West Hampton.
And this was the club championship at West Hampton. How old was he?
I would say he was 54, 55.
54 and loses in the finals of the club championship.
And on top of it,
a marvelous player on top of all of it.
Yeah,
Tremendous player.
We never really touched on it, but he grew up in the game. He went to college. He was the captain of the golf team at Dartmouth, which obviously is no slouch.
Which is not Lehigh.
And that's not quite Lehigh. He was, by the way, and he actually was a student, but he was.
He would want me to say that.
But I will tell you,
my friend would want me to say that.
The guy that he played number 2 to in high school was a guy named Johnny Baldwin. Johnny Baldwin went on to, I don't know if he ran the MGA, but him and Johnny Baldwin played 1 and 2 at Traver High School in Port Washington. I don't think they lost a high school match. I think they
never lost.
I think they halved once. I think they were something like 39-0-1.
Senior was a good player. Very good player.
Yeah. That was his
scrappy.
Like
I will tell you,
he was a fighter.
One of the best short games in terms of one of the best.
And I think for
games.
match play, that's what grinds people up. When you're getting it up and down from, especially West Hampton Country Club's club championship is a match play event. You qualify,
Just
one
fight.
round, and then it's 16 guys.
You got to go battle this
It's
guy.
like like a lot of these.
You said it well though. He was definitely a student of the game.
He
Like
was.
he did all of the like.
Oh, he
by the
was.
way, I have a binder somewhere, or maybe you have it. One of us has it, where when he went to Dave Peltz for 4 days, and he's gone to every golf school. Like
Right.
I mean, he was always thinking about it, reading books, magazines. Like he definitely loved the game. But I will tell you the one thing, and my mom would tell you the same thing if she were here. There was a period of time where he basically shelved it. He didn't.
Oh,
like
it was,
when we were.
it was
he
at
had
least
5.
15 years out of college.
He had 5
He didn't
kids.
play golf 15 years out of college.
He
He did not
yeah,
play.
He had 5
work.
kids.
Yeah,
Well,
He couldn't
had to work.
afford it. He
Had
was
to work.
like not in a great job.
by the way, I think he could
and-
afford it, but I think what it came down to was he had 5 kids
Didn't pick up the club.
between. He had 5 kids that were
Then he didn't
spanned
pick the
7
club. He
years.
never played.
touched the
Never
golf.
went to it with his
How old
buddies.
was he in that one day?
I would say that was probably in his. I would say he was probably in his mid to late 30s into his probably mid 40s.
Yeah.
Like we
He
had
covered. He covered.
yeah.
He had to cover.
He was there. He did his
Yeah,
job. He
did
didn't.
his job.
And my mom would probably tell you it wasn't probably that drastic, but like it wasn't like us, where you probably average once a month or twice a month, and you play your 30 or 40 rounds. He went to a point where he played probably 3 or 4 times a year because he was a father. There's pictures of him sitting on sidelines at graduations, at class things. Like he definitely showed up. Now I think we would both say his career, the way it was set up, we'd come home, we'd do our sports, we'd do this, and he'd kind of roll in at like 6:30, and we'd have dinner. He'd pop 2 Budweisers. We would go to bed, and like we never saw him in the morning, and we
was
saw him in
gone.
the evening for a couple hours.
What time was he out of the house?
5
Oh
o'clock.
man, he
We
was
were
on like
long-
a
long,
5
yeah.
something
It
train.
was long before you
Yeah,
were up.
long before we were
And he
awake,
gets
and
in at
then
6:30.
and that was
See him
probably
for a little bit.
Yeah.
that was probably Monday, Tuesday, and I'm sure he entertained Wednesday, Thursday, and then we went through a phase where we went down to Long Beach Island, and that was when we became close friends with the Olkers. Richie, obviously,
Right.
near and dear, one of my
Wonderful.
dad's best friends, and then obviously Ryan is one of our best friends, and then we transitioned to West Hampton, and that was our West Hampton phase. But to get back to the 9/11, because I feel like we need to close that door.
I had spoke to him that morning. I had called him. I went to, as we mentioned, Ohio Wesleyan. I was paired randomly because
Is that like the Harvard of the Midwest?
of Delaware, Ohio.
Delaware.
It was the Harvard
Just
of
I'm
Delaware.
sorry. I'm
Delaware.
I'm sorry.
Ohio, not
Okay.
the state of.
So you talked to him that morning. Very cool.
What?
What time is
yeah,
this?
but it was
8:30?
terrible. It was a terrible reason to have talked to him. I went to college with a guy, or my roommate in college was a gentleman that I went to high school with, Anthony Robistelli. We got paired together in college. We were both going out to Ohio Wesleyan. We were both going to try to play lacrosse for the team. And unfortunately, Anthony's dad had suffered a stroke prior to 9/11 and ended up succumbing prior that week. And the wake was that Tuesday at home in Manhasset. So I had called my dad because, we had both spoke on Monday and Tuesday. He's like, I'd like to go to the wake with you. I want to see Anthony, and why don't we take the train out together? Train goes right to our hometown. So I was like, okay, cool. So I called him at 8:40. I was finishing up my trade breaks, cleaning up, the previous days. And I was like, he's like, just meet me in the back of track. It's going to be track 19 because it was always the same track. He's like, meet me in the back of track 19. He's like, we'll hook up and we'll ride the 443 home, and then we'll go to St. Mary's, the church we grew up going to, and we'll go to Fairchild and do the whole 9 yards. And then he's like, why don't I buy you dinner, and then I'll send you back on the train, and you can go back to Hoboken, because I was living in Jeff in Hoboken.
So cool.
So I was just like, yeah, cool. I'm like, I'll meet you in, one of the last 3 cars. And it Penn Station at that time is easy. It's a shame what's going on right now up there, but you knew where the last 3 cars were. Right. It was easy. You knew what staircase to go down, and it was easy. So I spoke to him, and it was like a brief conversation, and he's like, actually, you got to sign your taxes because we got to, whatever, we were filing them later. I don't even know why, but he had something that I had to sign. And so I was like, all right, cool. I'll meet you in the third to last car, and then we'll go to the wake, and then we'll have dinner. And
that was 8:40, 8:45.
Yeah,
And this all broke 9.
No, it was an 8 handle. My sister had
Right
also
at that time.
My
it was right
sister
before.
had also
Right
spoken
before.
to him.
Yeah, it was right before.
I've-
It wasn't a big deal.
Right.
You had. I had
It was
a
within
good-
minutes.
it
I mean,
was-
this is not. This isn't. And by the way, I've spoken to a a number of his clients who were on the phone with him like 30 seconds, a minute before this all happened.
Yeah.
Like had like where he was giving advice to a guy at a client that we now cover,
Yeah,
a guy named
yeah.
Charlie Fish, who's a great guy, who he was giving him advice on how to like be a parent. Charlie had just had his first son. My dad was giving him advice on like, being a dad, and like was actually, going back and forth with Charlie on September. We both worked on September 11th this year, and he was saying that like on that morning he was giving me this advice on being a dad, and like I just thought I should tell you.
Yeah, it's
But-
cool.
but
And like the fact that now you're still hearing those stories. We heard this story
There is.
a week ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. You always
let's,
heard it kind of after that. But to hear
So
it
by the
this
way,
way,
I can follow. I can kind of give you the very quick story because I know we're tight on time. But we leave. So this is September 11th. We go to sleep. September 12th, we wake up. We hop on a path. We're going out to Long Island. We know this isn't good, right? We haven't heard from my dad. People are on computers and trying to figure out where people are, and like
calling hospitals.
we get to the New York City, and somebody called us. I must have had a cell phone, which is crazy to think because I think I must have and someone called me and they're like, Dad's name showed up on a survivor list down at the hospital, at NYU hospital down next to the World Trade Center. So we walk in. Do you remember? We get to Midtown. We come out. I find a police officer. There's no cabs. Nobody's in New York City. It's a ghost town. It's probably like what it was the last few months.
Frozen.
And so I walk up to a police officer. I'm like, our dad was in the World Trade Center. He's on a survivor list downtown. And they're like, get in the car. And so we get in the back of the cop car. Andy's third time in the back of the cop car. My first time. So we take the ride.
They're real.
No,
That's
second.
Is this
That's
gonna
a
be
different-
public information?
This is
It's public.
That's a different podcast.
Not true.
Okay, not sure.
So we go down, we walk into this hospital.
I love it.
This hospital's a mess. Like there's people running around, there's people on gurneys. We're like, Jeff LeVeen. They're like, we don't know what you're talking about. There's nobody Jeff LeVeen
I mean,
here.
it's a mess.
So we get out.
You're wasting your time.
We get out. I think we actually walk back up to Penn Station. We get on a local train. We go back out to my mom's house.
You know how many people were on that train?
Zero.
It
There
was
was zero
me and
people.
Jeff, and I think one other person.
And I think we each like
Long Island Railroad train.
at this point I think
It's
we walked
packed.
in.
Those trains are
Every day.
always
Every
packed.
day it's packed.
Every day it's packed.
We get into Penn Station. We go down. I think we grab the beer. We get on the back of the train. We drive out to where the train takes you right into Plandome. We get off at Plandome. We walk up to my mom's house, and there's a ton of cars there. People know it's not good. At this point, there hasn't been a message.
There's so many
sent.
people in this town we grew
In
up
that
in,
town,
as you
yeah.
know.
Oh, I mean,
Plandome Country
I think
Club
there
also.
was 10 or 11 people in Manhasset that perished,
Right.
and then there was probably 4 or 5 in Garden City right
And
next
every
door.
every one of those little cities had a dozen.
Yeah,
plus.
and so at this point, it's September 12th, a revolving door. People are in and out, and I think what happens, as probably in every community, is somebody passes away, and then everybody shows up with food. And so there's just food coming in. There's counters full of food. My mom's there. My siblings are there. Everybody's a little bit wrecked. We're all now consuming.
Still really no word.
No word.
No
So
word, and there's
Sitting
so
there.
many people in your house.
we're sitting
Like,
there.
there's never
know,
people.
people
It's
are
not
nervous.
Like there's 6 of us.
And it's a
sitting
lot
in
of,
the
at this
house
point,
point.
it's,
That's
Like,
got to
it's
be
not just
really,
us 5 kids and my mom. Like,
you don't really know
because
how to
there's
react.
always people around. You're always there, like, and they're like, oh man.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of trying to like,
it was like an uptick from a wake. Like,
Yeah.
families were coming in, like the Robsons were there. Tommy and Rosa were obviously, have always been near and dear friends with my
Very
parents.
close.
And they were also
And they lived
3
across
doors
the
down.
street.
They were
Very
across the
close.
street.
Oh yeah.
And so, this goes on all day. And like some of my friends from high school were now coming by, and I was seeing them. And again, we were drinking because like it was the only thing to try to take the edge off.
Right.
And then sometime around like I would say
It was like
7
o'clock.
7 o'clock.
It was
the
dark
phone
out,
rings.
but it was an early
on
dark.
September 12th.
Like a
And it
little
was-
bit later than
Yeah, it was probably a
right
little
now.
darker than this.
Little
We're
bit
sitting
later.
around a round table in the kitchen. My mom gets a phone call. It's the president, who actually wasn't in the office that day, a guy named Peter DePuzzo, who was just like, we just want to let you know, we have confirmation. No one got out. They were up there.
We haven't heard
Yeah.
any from any.
No,
No one from Cantor, Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
no one got out.
They had
They perished.
four or
She-
5
he
floors.
called her.
Yeah, he called
Yeah,
my
they
mom.
called the house.
And so my mom was like, my mom got off the phone, was like, he was up there, he didn't get out. It was emotional, everybody was crying, it was definitely a tough time. But then, like, it very quickly went from that to, all of a sudden, it was like, within a matter of days, this person's got a memorial service.
Memorial,
this
memorial,
person,
memorial,
and,
memorial.
and from
I mean,
September,
he had two partners that didn't live near us.
Yeah,
One
so
lived in New Jersey, one lived in Connecticut.
So from September like 16th, 15th till September 25th, 26th, we went to memorial services. And like, listen, we're all blessed in the fact that I was 27 or 26 years old when my dad perished. Like one of his partners had a 2-week-old, you know, and two of his and his other partner had 2 very young boys.
Right.
And so these kids never even got a chance to enjoy any aspect of who their
He never
father
got to
was.
enjoy
Right,
secession.
right.
Never
He
got
never
to.
got to enjoy the best.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes your involvement with the club so special.
Yeah.
You had your dad for a brief time. You should have had him for 20 more years.
Yeah.
But you had him, and now you'll be able to pass those same things to your own kids.
Absolutely.
You know, as you did with little Jeffrey, LJ. And that's right. That's what makes it right.
Yeah.
And and you know the difficulties. You know, we're sitting almost 20 years now. It's very easy for you to talk about it. It had to be a decade before you could comfortably talk about it. I've never heard these stories. We've never talked about it.
So I can
As close as we've
listen,
been, I've never talked
And
about
I
it
think
because
part
I
of
didn't
that
really
is
need
like,
to.
well,
But it's
at least because I think, respectfully, part of that you were like, we don't need to sit in my office and talk about this.
I don't want to rip that
Band-Aid.
Band-Aid.
Talk about like how to
we'll
make,
talk about how'd you
how
play
to
today.
make this 48 hours your best 48 hours of the club.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that is what secession is to me, and will always be.
Yeah.
And I think that's what what your friends probably did as well.
100%.
Your friends did that as
Listen,
well.
I think
and that's
that
why every time you give them an invite, they're like, clear the schedule. I mean, I'll be there on Friday.
Correct.
And
So-
guess what?
And
3
it's
people
time.
cleared their schedule, and they're like, I can't wait to go.
Right.
so
Because
to
they know what
basically
you did.
to kind of fast forward into how this all played into secession, we realized he passed away. We went to a bunch of funerals, which was obviously bizarre because we'd walk into crowded churches and you'd be in there with thousands of people at other people's wakes, and we were there to honor the fact that, you know, Robson passed away, and there was a bunch of people from, not Tommy, but there was, you know, another Robson from town that passed away, and we would go in and sit in these churches, and people would immediately look over at us, you know, like, you know, because they knew what had happened to us. So we'd had my dad's memorial service.
But there might be 15, 20 other people
in the church
in the same boat.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
In the
you'd be in
same
you'd be in a
boat.
church
That
full.
And then you'd walk outside, and there would be the next batch of people waiting for the next memorial.
Yeah.
For the next
Somebody that you
memorial
just
service.
didn't know.
Yeah,
Correct.
and we would do.
And
So
that's
we
how
did.
raw it was for those 2 weeks.
Yeah, we did a bunch of memorial services. We then held my dad's, which was like a surreal day, and the fact that thousands of people showed up, and it was like at a church. Donnie Ross did the eulogy. Which I couldn't tell you the words to it today. I don't know how he would have even gotten through it. It was
Wonderful,
obviously still
wonderful
a terrible time. We did a memorial service. We went home. The next day we did our first and only grief counseling as a family. We got home from the grief counseling. There was detectives on the porch. They had found recovered my dad's, parts of my dad's remains. We did a burial for him 2 days later, which was a private family event. And we got home, I think we were all toast. We're like, we can't do this anymore. We can't be here. Yeah. Greg Vetch, who is a longtime secession member and was a colleague, he walked over and handed me his keys to his house in Belfair and said, take your family, get out of here. Get out of here. Yeah. Don't come back when you guys are ready. Go use my house. Yeah.
Cheers.
So we went down to Belfair.
Yeah. Cheers. Do whatever you want.
And we spent 3 or 4 weeks there, and it was
spent a month there.
Yeah, it was a tough time.
Month.
Well, I think
a month. We spent a month there.
Yeah.
And guess who was right behind us in the car? Uncle Eddie.
Yeah.
And his crew.
So
plowing down 95. My mom has an aunt in Virginia. We stopped there.
So we technically, actually, you know what? He didn't come. He
people.
gave us his car. We took his Tahoe. And he might have showed up down at Belfair for a little bit. But we ended up, you know what we ended up doing? We spent, I think, technically 3 weeks at Vetch's house. Then we came over to Buford, and we stayed at Tommy Robson's house. And then that was the week of the Blue Gray. And so Andy and I came and
You're wrong. The Blue Gray, we left Vetch's house because the Blue Gray, we stayed in the clubhouse.
Well,
we stayed upstairs.
I can tell you, Mom still, we might have for one night, but we definitely stayed at Tommy's house that week.
We stayed at Tommy's house later that week, but you called and you said, you guys are playing the Blue Gray. We're like, I mean, I don't know. And then you're like, come on,
Let's
By the
go.
way, in my house,
Let's go.
You
in
need
my
it.
house,
Come
I
on.
still have the blue flag with every signature
Yeah.
hanging in it's hanging in my house today.
Of everyone
I still
that played.
everyone that played, and all these members. A lot of them, a handful that aren't even alive anymore. Like I still have the honorary captain mug that's.
You remember who you played with first in your partner event?
Dick Deal.
That was your first partner.
Hey, man.
I played with Willie Williams.
Guess who
Played
my
with Dick
first
Deal.
partner was? Pat Ryan.
Dick wasn't my partner. Dick was.
That was
Patty
my
Ryan.
partner.
Yeah.
Daddy,
Pat Ryan. Guess who we played against?
still play. You still played. You played a ton with them.
Ton of
through the
men. We
years.
won a member
Through
fight.
the years. Through the years.
We played against David Hathaway. No, I played against David Hathaway in the alternate shot.
You played
We
against Bill
played
Clement
against
that year.
Joe McCauley and Bill Clement.
Yeah.
Me and Pat Ryan. That was our first match. By the way, that was the first tournament I ever played at Secession, outside of a reunion,
Yeah.
as a member.
As a member.
As a member.
Right.
So that was
How about that
we
for us?
played. So basically, for us,
How
we
about that
played
for-
in the blue gray
Marvelous.
that year.
Marvelous.
And while we were down there, LaValle pulled me aside and talked about the Leveen Roach, and he was saying we got to do something about it. I remember him standing there with his Boston accent, and I was like still completely shattered. And he's like, "We got to do something about this."
And for everybody uninitiated, the LeVeen Roach, we lost Stephen Roach as well. It was a Cantor
Yep.
boy as well.
He was the bomb guy.
From New Jersey, Ricky Roach's brother. And out of all of this murder and mayhem and some bitches that killed these wonderful people, there is a scholarship fund that was immediately funded, and by October it was funded, and Andy
Month
Levine handled that for a decade.
LaValle.
Ultimately,
LaValle,
Andy LaValle, and
Andy Levine wasn't doing anything.
no.
He
And
was a
then,
total, he was
of
a
course,
total
our
waste.
dear friend Frank Stone
Stoney.
carried on after LaValle, and this thing has gone on to bless hundreds and hundreds of people
Yep.
with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No. It's been since 2002, and I know because I've gotten more involved. I'm now on the board myself, and Andy's on the board himself, and there's been $2 million awarded to the Beaufort community since 2002. $2 million.
$2 million. We're handing out a couple of $100,000 a year.
Well, you can attest because you've shown up at the local high schools where and Pro's done it the best, where he's showing up and local charities are handing out $100 checks, and he's got how much in his pocket?
10,000.
Yeah.
The Rotary will hand out a $500 check to a young kid, and I'm sitting there holding 5 envelopes with $50,000 in it. 10,000 for 5 kids, and we could talk all night about that, but
Yeah.
I can't think, and I've said this for almost 2 decades now. I can't think of a better way to be remembered as a human being.
Oh my gosh.
No.
Your father.
I mean, you
Your
have
father
people that
and-
will call you and be like, dude, you saved my life. Like, I didn't have an opportunity to get an education.
Yeah.
And I don't know your dad. I don't even know you.
Yeah, and that Leveen Roach, Jeff Levine, Stephen Roach, those names will carry on in the
In that
lives of
community, absolutely.
hundreds and if not 1,000 kids
Yeah.
now,
Oh,
till they kick. Those names will resonate. Is there a better way to be remembered?
No.
I mean,
I don't.
No, I think-
I
I
don't
think the-
I would
so.
love to be remembered that way.
You'd like to be remembered that way.
Absolutely.
We would like to be remembered. I mean, it is the ultimate positive that came out of the ultimate negative.
Yeah.
I
And
think,
it's funny
I
because,
think-
I wouldn't say it's funny, but this is a community or an area that wasn't necessarily directly affected where we came from.
Right.
There's not a person that grew up anywhere near the New York City area that
Right.
doesn't know a dozen people that were killed that day. You come down here and people are like, we have a luncheon every year now to meet the families and do all this stuff. And these people are just like, now these kids, they weren't alive
No.
for September.
No.
Listen,
And
I would
they're
tell
still
you,
kind of like, this is amazing that
the
this,
big thing
this
is that Mike
around.
lives.
Still there
And it's
and still going.
Well, the biggest thing
amazing.
is that Mike has lived in the Beaufort community. One thing I could tell you is that there's very few communities that could use this support more than Beaufort. There's
Sure,
the
sure.
kids that we review, the total income for the family, like these folks need us. And like I think that what's beautiful is I know and we've had a lot that's gone on in 2020. Secession to me was a way to disconnect. And when you look at the word secession and like, disconnecting from the real world. When I'd go down to Secession, when we'd go down together, when we go down together today, we run 2 big events there annually. We run a pilgrimage event the weekend before Thanksgiving. We run my dad's memorial event that's now going on its, I think, 17th year. And these
You
are
want to brag that you're like the 2 or 3 time champion?
80 plus, 100 plus people that show up at these events.
I only got it once.
You got it once?
I got it once.
So I think for us,
He's very proud of us.
like
Multiple trophies.
all of these outsiders come into Beaufort, guests, members, go into town, run around, but I will tell you the one thing, beyond just being consumers in the town and using the restaurants and using the stores, like the positive impact that Secession Golf Club on the Beaufort community will never fully be recapped or appreciated as greatly as it should, because the amount of good that's been done there, the amount of kids that have gotten out of Beaufort and gone on,
you never know.
is massive.
Well, it's definitely under the radar screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. You funnel a couple of $100,000 a year into the community for scholarships. I mean, how can you ever fully gauge the exponential value of that in an individual's life?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are handing out $5 and $7 and $6 and $10,000 scholarships on an annual basis,
And that's the generosity of this great club.
and that is the club, and,
Yeah.
and that's
And
the
that's,
specialness
you know,
of it.
like,
And I would tell you, under the radar screen, the community knows that.
Yeah,
I think the community knows that
100% they know.
wholeheartedly, and
yeah.
not only the presence of the club is unusual because it's a true national, international club that has no
They have very
bearing
little ties
on
to the-
the local
to the
community
town,
at all.
right, yeah.
So we sit there as an anomaly to a large degree, but we sent 30,000 dinners into town.
Yeah.
I mean, the economic impact of 100 caddies, darn near 100 employees. I mean, that was never that big a deal. Just like the LeVeen Roach, we never wanted to boast about it, but the impact
No,
is
when you
is
take a step
extraordinary.
back and
Yeah.
20 years later, you're looking at 30 years
Listen,
later
we're
from
finally
the club.
starting. I think at this point, our first kids. I think we're in 03. Like we have kids that now have gone out and done something,
Correct.
become doctors and lawyers,
Correct.
PGA professionals. We've impacted a community.
We were
And
in the community. We were today serviced by a young kid in the pro shop, in the golf operations.
Yep.
Who was a LeVeen Roach scholarship.
Yep.
I mean,
Christian
it's just extraordinary,
cool.
and it's if you're going to live a life, and if you're fortunate to live a life that really impacts people, you've lived a rich life.
Yep.
And we sit here today, almost 20 years now, next year, to the anniversary date of 9/11, and your dad's impact and Stephen Roach's impact is being felt in a small community, and that's the reason I wanted to have these boys here. Period. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. It's an extraordinary circumstance.
We could talk for hours.
We could go for days on this, days on this. But we'll wrap it up, and just give your lasting impressions on this. I wing this thing every time we sit down with people. I never know what I'm going to say, but wrap it up. Tell me your thoughts of how it's evolved.
Well, I can tell you, I think that it's simple. Like, if you took a page out of my dad's book, he just lived every day to the fullest. He didn't take days off to sit around our house.
Yeah.
When he took days off, we did stuff. He went places. He traveled. He did golf trips with his buddies. I mean, we have endless pictures of him doing golf trips with his buddies down to Secession. He packed, 100 years into 55 years.
Right.
And so I think that if we probably do anything, it's try to emulate that. Like, listen,
Sure.
you don't know what your lot in life is. Like, you don't know if you're here for another, year or another, 40 years. And so I think that the one thing I try to take away from him is that he lived life to the fullest. He treated people with the equal amount of respect. And I can tell you that, for us, so many of our memories, both with him in kind of the early years of secession, and unfortunately, even up until 2000, 2001, and since then, we've had so many amazing events. We've had so many amazing, pilgrimages with a lot of the work folks. We've had a lot of, with JEL memorials with his buddies that you've seen them change over the last, 17 years, where the first ones was surrounded with a bunch of guys that were my dad's best friends. They're all now in their 60s and 70s and don't show up or have passed away, and it's transitioned more to our our contemporaries.
Right.
But I could tell you that, if anything, secession has proven to be, a way for us to get down there and get closer to him and to be, to feel like, his presence. And I know for me, every time I walk that golf course, whether it's a great round or a terrible round, he's there. Exactly. And his spirit is there. And I think that the way that, I think he's brought us there and our, and our memories there, but also his legacy he's left behind and what he's done and Steve Roach has done to the community and the employees and to help, raise money has been phenomenal. So for me, secession isn't a golf membership. It's much more than that. Sure. This is Daniel Island is a wonderful place. If we moved away, Daniel Island would go away. Secession will never go away. Secession's a place.
And I think that one thing that we realized, he introduced us to the Low Country.
Yeah. And now you both live.
And we wouldn't be living here if we didn't have secession. The reality is we've always loved secession. Our friends, our family members, they all love secession. I could call my sister up and she would drop everything to come to secession. I played in a reunion with my sister. I played in a reunion with you. Secession to us has been so much more than a golf club, as he said. Right. We live close to secession for one reason. It's now part of our lives. We're raising our family here. Yeah. And the fact that we can give back to the community through, the LeVeen's scholarship, that's just an added bonus. Okay. But it's the same thing. You go down there, you spend time, you see familiar faces. You get down there, the first thing I do when I get down there, there's a little plaque outside the golf shop when you're going out to the pro or out to the first tee, members on campus. Yeah. And you're find a guy, and you're like, oh, I know that guy. Let me make a point to go find him.
You're going to find him. Yeah, you'll find him.
Make a point. It's a community. Yeah. And I felt the minute I got there, and I would say that I noticed it from Jeff too. And we didn't have to have a conversation, right? Where we both were we're going to live in this area. Yeah. Some part of our lives.
You ended up.
And I wouldn't say that 9/11 caused us to live here. I just felt it got to a point where the line of work we're in has evolved that has enabled us to do that. Yeah. But at the same time, the Low Country was a place for him, and every day I'm here. Yeah. I feel, and you know what? It's cool.
If he were able to show up today and see what we've done now, where we live, and what we do, this would be exactly where he'd be.
He would. Yeah, he would.
100%.
Well, folks, now you know why I wanted to have these two remarkable young men in. It's a tremendous story. We could talk for a day, easily.
Do it again.
For a day. But thanks for stopping in and seeing us. And to Mr. Senior, Jeffrey LeVeen, God bless.
Thanks, bro. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We'll do it again.
Big boy.
Need more wine.
You're out of wine.
We need more wine.
Right.
Off to dinner.
Yeah.
All right.
That was
Beautiful.
great. That was great.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That was awesome. Thank you.
That could have been
Appreciate it.
5 hours.
Sure it was. And we're really late, but who cares? I wasn't going to push that one.
Well, you got to understand something.